The police officer stood in my driveway, his hand resting on his radio. Behind him, Karen pointed her finger at me like I was some kind of criminal. My heart pounded as I looked at the empty concrete hole where my pool used to be. Just 24 hours ago, I thought removing it would end this nightmare. I thought Karen would finally leave my family alone. I was wrong. "Sir, we have reports that you are operating an illegal demolition site," the officer said. His voice was professional, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk spreading across her face. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally broken me. But what Karen did not know was that I had been recording everything. Every complaint, every threat, every lie she told. And what I discovered about her would change everything. That was the moment I realized the war was just beginning. 5 years ago, I thought I had found paradise. The house sat on a quiet street in Maple Ridge, a suburb where American dreams came true. White picket fences lined the sidewalks, and children rode their bikes until the streetlights came on. When my wife Sarah and I first walked through that front door, we knew we were home. But it was the backyard that sealed the deal. The previous owners had installed a beautiful in-ground pool, complete with a waterfall feature and LED lighting that turned the water into liquid sapphire at night. The real estate agent smiled as she watched our faces light up. "This is where memories are made," she said. She was right. That pool became the heart of our family life. Our twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, learned to swim in those crystal-clear waters. We hosted birthday parties where kids splashed and laughed until their parents had to drag them home. Summer evenings meant barbecues on the deck, while the girls played Marco Polo with their friends. I took pride in maintaining everything perfectly. Every morning before work, I would test the water chemistry and skim the surface clean. The landscaping around the pool was magazine-worthy. Our neighbors often complimented the beautiful space we had created. Most of our neighbors were wonderful people. The Johnsons next door became close friends. Tom would help me with yard work, and his wife Linda would bring over fresh cookies. The elderly couple across the street, the Millers, loved watching the kids play from their front porch. Even the busy family at the corner always waved and smiled. But there was one neighbor who seemed different from the start. Karen Martinez lived 3 houses down, in a pristine colonial with not a blade of grass out of place. She kept to herself mostly, but I noticed how she would stand at her window sometimes, watching the neighborhood with sharp eyes. The first time I met Karen, she was walking her small white dog past our house. Emma and Sophie were playing in the pool with their friends, their laughter echoing across the yards. Karen stopped at the edge of our property and stared for a long moment. "Nice pool," she said when she saw me watering the flowers, but her tone was flat, almost cold. "I hope it does not get too noisy." "Oh, the kids are great," I replied with a friendly smile. "They usually wrap up by dinner time." Karen nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the pool. "I am sure they do," she said. Then she walked away without another word. At the time, I brushed it off. Every neighborhood had someone who preferred quiet. I figured Karen was just being cautious, maybe trying to set expectations early. I respected that. I had always believed in being a good neighbor. Over the next few months, I noticed Karen more often. She would appear at her window when we had pool parties. She would walk her dog past our house multiple times a day, always slowing down to look at our backyard. Once, I caught her taking pictures of our pool area with her phone. "Maybe she is thinking about getting a pool too," Sarah suggested when I mentioned it. "You know how people research these things." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that Karen was just a careful neighbor who preferred peace and quiet, but something in her eyes that first day had felt different, something that made me wonder if our paradise was not as perfect as it seemed. I had no idea that Karen was already planning something that would destroy everything we had built. The first official complaint came on a Tuesday morning in June. I was getting ready for work when the doorbell rang. A man in a polo shirt stood on my porch, holding a clipboard and looking uncomfortable. "I am from the City Noise Compliance Office," he said. "We received a complaint about excessive noise from your property." My stomach dropped. Noise? What kind of noise? "Pool parties, loud music, children screaming." He read from his notes. "The complaint says this happens multiple times per week, often lasting past 10 p.m. I stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, we have never had music playing past 8 p.m., and children laughing while they swim is hardly screaming." The inspector was actually quite reasonable. He walked around our property, noted the pool equipment, and asked about our typical schedule. "Honestly," he said quietly, "this seems like a pretty normal family setup, but I have to follow up on every complaint. Just try to keep the noise down after 8 p.m. After he left, I knew exactly who had called. Corinne Martinez, but I decided to take the high road. That evening, I walked down to her house and knocked on her door. "Hi, Corinne," I said when she answered. "I wanted to talk to you about the pool situation." Her eyes narrowed. "What about it?" "Well, we got a visit from the city today. I am wondering if there are specific times that work better for you when the kids are swimming." Corinne crossed her arms. "The problem is not the times. The problem is the noise. Pool pumps running constantly, children yelling, adults talking loudly. It is disrupting the peace of this neighborhood." I tried to stay calm. "I understand your concern. What if we limit pool time to between noon and 6 p.m. on weekdays?" "That does not solve the pump noise," she said sharply, "or the weekend parties." "We only have friends over maybe twice a month," I explained, "and we always wrap up by 8 p.m. Corinne shook her head. "That is still too much. This is a quiet neighborhood. People bought homes here for peace and tranquility." Walking back to my house, I felt confused and frustrated. I had tried to be reasonable, but Corinne seemed determined to find problems with everything. Sarah was waiting for me in the kitchen. "How did it go?" she asked. "Not great. She basically wants us to never use our pool." "That is ridiculous," Sarah said. "We have every right to enjoy our property." But Corinne was just getting started. Over the next few weeks, the complaints escalated. The city inspector came back twice more. The HOA president called me about noise violations. Corinne had apparently been taking detailed notes about every time our kids played outside. The breaking point came during Emma's birthday party in July. We had invited 6 kids from her class for an afternoon of swimming and cake. The party was scheduled from 2 to 5 p.m., and I had personally walked to every neighboring house to let them know about it in advance. At exactly 3 p.m., Corinne appeared at our back gate. She was holding her phone, recording video of the children playing in the pool. "Excuse me," I called out. "What are you doing?" "Documenting the noise violations," she said loudly. "This is evidence of ongoing harassment of the neighborhood." The kids stopped playing and stared. Emma started crying. "Daddy, why is that lady filming us?" My blood boiled. "Corinne, you need to stop recording my children right now." "I am on public property," she lied. She was clearly standing on my property line. "I have every right to document this disturbance." Several parents quickly gathered their kids and left early. Emma's birthday party was ruined. That night, I called a lawyer. Technically, she cannot record your children without permission, the attorney explained. But proving harassment is difficult. These cases can get expensive quickly. I hung up feeling defeated. Karen had managed to turn our dream home into a source of stress and conflict. But I still believed that reasonable people could work things out. I had no idea that Karen was already planning something far worse than noise complaints. She was building a case, documenting everything, and preparing for a battle that would threaten everything my family held dear. The war was about to begin, and I was completely unprepared. The certified letter arrived on a Monday morning in August. My hands shook as I signed for it, somehow knowing that whatever was inside would change everything. The return address showed Karen Martinez, but the letter was written on official-looking legal letterhead. I tore it open and read the first line 3 times before my brain could process the words. Notice of legal action. Demand for immediate pool removal. My heart stopped. I sat down heavily on the porch steps and forced myself to read the entire document. Karen was demanding that we completely remove our pool within 30 days or face legal action for property damage, noise violations, and decreased property values. The letter was filled with accusations that made my head spin. According to Karen, our pool was causing structural damage to neighboring foundations through improper water drainage. She claimed the pool equipment was creating industrial-level noise pollution, and that our constant parties and gatherings were destroying the family-friendly atmosphere of the neighborhood. But the most shocking claim was at the bottom of the second page. Karen was alleging that our pool was improperly permitted, and that the illegal construction was affecting property values for the entire street. I rushed inside to Sarah, who was getting the girls ready for school. "You need to read this," I said, handing her the letter. Sarah's face went pale as she scanned the document. "This is insane. She wants us to remove our pool. Can she even do that?" "I have no idea," I said, "but she seems to think she can." After the girls left for school, I called the city planning office. "I need to verify the permit status for a pool at my address," I told the clerk. 20 minutes later, I had my answer. Our pool was completely legal, properly permitted, and up to code. The previous owners had followed every regulation perfectly. Next, I called our home insurance company. "Have you received any claims about property damage from our pool?" I asked. "No, sir," the representative said. "We show no claims or issues with your property." I spent the rest of the day making calls. Every accusation in Karen's letter was false. Our pool was legal, properly maintained, and causing no damage to anyone. But the letter made it clear that Karen was prepared to take us to court if we did not comply. That evening, I walked down to Karen's house again. This time, I brought the letter with me. "Karen, we need to talk about this letter," I said when she answered the door. She smiled coldly. "I hope you are calling to discuss removal dates." "Our pool is completely legal," I said. "I verified every permit today. You have no grounds for these claims." Karen's smile faded. "The permits do not matter. What matters is the impact on this neighborhood. That pool is a nuisance, and I am prepared to prove it in court." "What exactly do you want from us?" I asked. "I want that pool gone," she said. "Filled in, removed, landscaped over. I want this neighborhood to return to the peaceful place it was before you moved in." I could not believe what I was hearing. "Karen, we have kids. That pool is part of our family life." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you bought a house in a quiet neighborhood," she snapped. "Look," I said, trying one more time to be reasonable. What if we compromise? We could install better soundproofing around the equipment. We could limit pool hours even more strictly. Karen shook her head. No compromises, no negotiations. Either you remove that pool voluntarily, or I will force you to remove it through the courts. And if we refuse? Her eyes gleamed with something that looked like satisfaction. Then you will find out exactly how expensive legal battles can be. I have been documenting everything for months. I have witness statements from neighbors. I have noise measurements and property damage assessments. She pulled out a thick folder and waved it at me. I have enough evidence to tie you up in court for years. Do you have enough money to fight a legal battle that long? Walking back home, I felt sick to my stomach. Karen was not just making threats. She had been planning this for months, building a case, preparing for war. And she was right about one thing: legal battles were expensive. That night, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, trying to figure out if we could afford to fight. The numbers were terrifying. Even if we won, the legal costs could bankrupt us. Maybe we should just move, Sarah said quietly. And let her win, I replied. Let her drive us out of our home. We both knew the answer. Karen had backed us into a corner, and she knew it. She was betting that we would choose financial survival over principle. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I barely slept, barely ate, and could not focus on anything except the impossible choice Karen had forced upon us. Every morning, I would look out at our beautiful pool and wonder if it would still be there next month. Sarah and I had countless conversations that always ended the same way: fight and risk losing everything, or surrender and lose our family's happiness. Neither option felt like something we could live with. What if we take out a loan? Sarah suggested one evening after the girls had gone to bed. I had already run the numbers. Even if we could qualify for enough money to fight this, we would be paying it off for the next 10 years, and there is no guarantee we would win. But she is lying about everything, Sarah said. How can she win with lies? Because legal battles are not about truth, I replied. They are about who can afford to keep fighting longer. The worst part was watching how the stress affected Emma and Sophie. They could sense the tension between Sarah and me, even though we tried to hide it. Emma asked me one day why I looked sad all the time. I did not know how to explain that someone was trying to take away their favorite place in the world. I scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney to understand our options. The news was not good. Karen is using what we call SLAPP tactics, the lawyer explained. Strategic lawsuits against public participation. She is not necessarily trying to win. She is trying to exhaust your resources and force you to give up. But everything she is claiming is false, I said. That does not matter, he replied. Proving her claims are false will require expert witnesses, property assessments, and months of depositions. Even if you win, you are looking at $50,000 to $70,000 in legal fees. My heart sank. We did not have that kind of money. What if we just ignore her? I asked. Then she will file in court, and you will have to respond. Ignoring a lawsuit is not an option. I left the lawyer's office feeling defeated. That evening, I called my father to ask for advice. Son, he said after I explained the situation, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is live to fight another day. You think we should give in? I think you should protect your family, he said. That pool is not worth bankrupting yourselves over. But it was not just about the pool anymore. It was about Karen's bullying, about someone using money and manipulation to destroy our happiness. It was about the principle of standing up for what was right. Sarah found me sitting by the pool that night, staring at the water. "I have been thinking," she said quietly. "About what?" "About what happens if we remove the pool." I looked at her in surprise. "You want to give in?" "I want to protect our family," she said. "We could put the money we save on legal fees toward the girls' college fund. We could take family vacations instead of fighting legal battles. And let Karen win." Sarah sat down beside me. "Maybe winning is not about the pool. Maybe winning is about keeping our family together and happy." I knew she was right, but it felt like swallowing poison. I cannot stand the thought of her celebrating while we destroy something our kids love. "Neither can I," Sarah said. "But I also cannot stand the thought of losing our house because we could not afford legal fees." That weekend, I called 3 pool removal companies to get estimates. The numbers were brutal. Professional removal would cost $15,000, but it was still less than half of what fighting Karen would cost. The hardest part was telling Emma and Sophie. They cried when I explained that we might have to remove the pool. Emma asked if we could move to a house with a nicer neighbor. Sophie asked if Karen hated children. I did not know how to answer either question. On Sunday night, I made the decision that would haunt me for months. I called the pool removal company and scheduled the work for the following week. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked when I hung up the phone. "No," I said, "but I am sure we cannot afford to fight." That night, I lay awake thinking about Karen's smug face when she realized she had won. I thought about how she had used fear and intimidation to get what she wanted. I thought about what kind of lesson this taught my daughters about standing up to bullies. I had no idea that removing the pool would not end Karen's campaign against us. I had no idea that her victory would make her even more dangerous. And I had no idea that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. The demolition crew arrived at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I watched from the kitchen window as they unloaded their equipment: jackhammers, excavators, and a massive dump truck. The sound of their diesel engines shattered the quiet suburban morning like a declaration of war. Emma and Sophie pressed their faces against the window, watching the men prepare to destroy their childhood paradise. "Why do they have to break it, Daddy?" Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper. I knelt down beside her, my heart breaking. Sometimes adults have to make hard decisions to protect their families. "But I do not want them to break our pool," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "I know, sweetheart, I do not want them to either." Sarah took the girls to school early that day. She could not bear to watch the destruction, and she did not want the kids to see their pool being torn apart. I stayed home to supervise the work, even though every blow of the jackhammer felt like a punch to my gut. The foreman, a weathered man named Mike, approached me as his crew started marking the concrete. "You sure about this, buddy?" he asked. "This is a beautiful pool. Shame to see it go." "I am sure," I lied. Mike shook his head. "In 20 years of doing this job, I have never seen someone remove a pool in this good condition. Usually, it is because of major structural problems or insurance issues." "It is complicated," I said. "Must be some complication," Mike muttered. As the crew began their work, I noticed Karen's car in her driveway. She had taken the day off work to watch the show. Every few minutes, I would catch her peeking out her window or walking to her mailbox for no reason. She wanted to witness her victory firsthand. The demolition was brutal. The first swing of the jackhammer sent chunks of concrete flying across the yard. The sound was deafening, like a construction site had exploded in our backyard. Within an hour, cracks spiderwebbed across the beautiful blue surface where my daughters had learned to swim. By lunchtime, half the pool was gone. The excavator scooped out chunks of concrete and tile, loading them into the dump truck with mechanical precision. Years of family memories disappeared into the back of a truck. That afternoon, Karen made her move. She walked over to the fence line with her phone out, recording the destruction. "Excuse me," she called to Mike. "Is this work being done with proper permits?" Mike looked confused. "Lady, this is demolition. We are tearing something down, not building it up." "But the noise ordinance," Karen insisted. "This level of noise requires special permits." I walked over to the fence. "Karen, what are you doing?" "Making sure this work is being done legally," she said with a satisfied smile. "Just because you are finally doing the right thing does not mean you can disturb the entire neighborhood." Mike looked at me with raised eyebrows. "This the neighbor who caused all this trouble?" I nodded and Mike turned to Karen. "Lady, we have every permit we need, and we will be done by 5 p.m. today. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the city." Karen's smile faltered, but she kept recording. "I am documenting this for the neighborhood association." "Document away," Mike said, "but stay off this property." By evening, the pool was completely gone. Where Emma and Sophie had once played Marco Polo, there was now just a gaping hole filled with dirt and gravel. The crew had done their best to level the ground, but it looked like a bomb had gone off in our backyard. Sarah came home with the girls around dinner time. Emma took one look at the empty space and burst into tears. Sophie just stared silently, like she could not process what she was seeing. "It is gone," Emma sobbed. "It is really gone." I hugged her tight, fighting back my own tears. "I am sorry, sweetheart. I am so sorry." That night, after the girls were asleep, Sarah and I sat on the back deck looking at the disaster that used to be our beautiful yard. The grass around the pool area was torn up from the heavy equipment. The landscaping was ruined. Even the waterfall feature, which had been built into the surrounding stonework, was reduced to rubble. "Maybe we can build something else back there," Sarah suggested. "A playground or a garden." "Maybe," I said, but my heart was not in it. The next morning, I found a note in my mailbox. It was from Karen, written on her personal stationery with perfect penmanship. "Thank you for finally doing the right thing," it read. "The neighborhood is much more peaceful now. I hope this experience has taught you the importance of being considerate of others." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, but Karen was not done yet. Over the next few days, she began complaining about the dirt and debris in our yard. She filed a report with the city about improper landscaping and unsightly property conditions. She demanded that we install professional landscaping within 30 days. I realized with growing horror that removing the pool had not satisfied Karen. It had only proved that her tactics worked. She had tasted victory, and now she wanted more. But what Karen did not know was that the pool removal had been recorded by the city as part of a noise complaint investigation. And in those recordings, she had said things that would come back to haunt her. 3 weeks after the pool removal, I was cleaning up the backyard when I noticed something that made me stop cold. Karen's property had a small wooden deck that extended about 2 feet onto what I was pretty sure was actually my land. I had never paid attention to it before, but now I was looking at everything with different eyes. I pulled out the property survey we had received when we bought the house and compared it to the actual boundaries. Karen's deck was definitely on my property. But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part was what I found when I researched the permits for that deck. There were no permits. Karen had built an unpermitted structure that encroached on my property. I sat in my car outside the city planning office, staring at the documents in my hand. According to the building codes, any structure over 2 feet in height required a permit. Any structure built within 5 feet of a property line required special approval. Karen's deck violated both rules. But the real bombshell was hidden in the complaint files. While researching Karen's deck, I had asked to see any other code violations or complaints associated with her address. The clerk handed me a thick folder. Karen Martinez had a history. Over the past 5 years, she had filed complaints against 7 different neighbors. But more importantly, she had been cited for 4 different violations herself, including an unpermitted fence, improper waste disposal, and running an unlicensed business from her home. The business violation was the most interesting. Karen had been operating a home daycare without proper licensing or permits. The city had shut her down 2 years ago after neighbors complained about the noise and traffic. Karen had been the exact kind of neighbor she accused me of being. I made copies of everything and drove home with my heart pounding. For the first time in months, I felt hope. That evening, I called my lawyer. I need to know what my options are for dealing with an unpermitted structure on my property. That is actually a serious violation, he said. You can demand immediate removal or you can file a complaint with the city. Either way, she would be required to tear it down. What about the other violations? Even better, if she has a pattern of code violations, the city can impose serious penalties. Fines, liens, even forced compliance. What would that cost me? Nothing. The city handles code enforcement complaints for free. I hung up the phone and smiled for the first time in weeks. Karen had made a crucial mistake. She had been so focused on tearing down my pool that she had forgotten about her own violations. The next morning, I filed complaints with the city about Karen's unpermitted deck, her fence violations, and requested a review of her business licensing. I also filed a formal complaint about harassment and requested that all of her previous complaints against me be reviewed in light of her own violations. Then I waited. The city inspector arrived at Karen's house on a Thursday morning. I happened to be working in my front yard when he showed up with his clipboard and measuring tape. Through the windows, I could see Karen gesturing frantically as the inspector documented her violations. An hour later, the inspector knocked on my door. "Sir, I wanted to let you know that we found several violations at the Martinez property. She has 30 days to correct them or face fines and potential legal action." "What about her complaints against me?" The inspector shook his head. "Given her own violation history, we are dismissing most of her claims as harassment. Your property is in full compliance with all codes." That afternoon, Karen appeared at my door. Her face was red and her hands were shaking. "You filed complaints against me," she said. "It was not a question." "I filed factual reports about code violations," I replied calmly. "This is retaliation," she spat. "I will file a harassment complaint against you." "Karen, you have been filing false complaints against me for months. You forced me to remove a legal, permitted pool based on lies. And now you are angry because I reported your actual violations." "My deck is not hurting anyone," she said. "Neither was my pool," I replied. "But according to you, following the rules matters more than personal convenience." Karen's face turned even redder. "You cannot prove I filed false complaints." "Actually, I can." I pulled out a folder of documents. "The city gave me copies of all your complaints. You claimed my pool was unpermitted. That was a lie. You claimed it was causing structural damage. That was a lie. You claimed I was violating noise ordinances, also a lie. I was protecting the neighborhood, she said weakly. You were bullying a family because you wanted to control them, I replied. And now you are facing the consequences. Corinne stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment she realized the tables had turned. Her confident mask slipped, and for the first time she looked scared. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to leave my family alone," I said. "No more complaints, no more harassment, no more recording my children. You focus on fixing your own violations, and I will focus on my family." "And if I do not?" I smiled. "Then you will find out exactly how expensive legal battles can be." Corinne turned and walked away without another word. But I knew this was not over. She had invested too much in her campaign against us to give up easily. What I did not expect was how desperate she would become. The police officer who came to my door the next morning was the same one from my nightmares. But this time, Corinne was not with him. This time, he was there to serve her with a restraining order. "Sir, I wanted to let you know that we have issued a no-contact order against your neighbor," Officer Rodriguez said. "She is not allowed to approach your property, contact you or your family, or file any further complaints without going through proper legal channels." "What happened?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "She filed a false police report claiming you threatened her," he said. "But when we reviewed the security footage from the city building, we could see that you were actually quite professional during your conversation. She also tried to file another noise complaint, but given her history of false reports, we referred her to the district attorney's office instead." It turned out that Corinne's desperation had been her downfall. After our conversation about her violations, she had filed 3 more complaints against me in a single day. But this time, the city was watching. They had flagged her account for potential harassment, and when she tried to claim I had threatened her, they reviewed all the evidence. The security cameras at the city building had recorded our entire conversation. The footage showed me speaking calmly while Corinne became increasingly agitated. When she tried to claim I had threatened her, the video proved she was lying. "The district attorney is considering charges for filing false reports," Officer Rodriguez continued. "She could face fines and community service. But more importantly for you, she is banned from filing any further complaints without court approval." 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Corinne's attorney. She was agreeing to remove her unpermitted deck, fix her fence violations, and pay all associated fines. In exchange, she wanted me to agree not to pursue any further action against her. I consulted with my lawyer, who advised accepting the agreement. "You have won," he said. "She can never harass you again without facing serious legal consequences." The day Corinne's contractor came to remove her deck was strangely satisfying. I watched from my kitchen window as they tore down the structure that had been illegally sitting on my property for years. The irony was not lost on me that Corinne was now watching her own property being demolished. But the real victory came a month later. Sarah and I had been discussing what to do with the empty space where our pool used to be. The girls still asked about it sometimes, and the bare patch of dirt was a constant reminder of what we had lost. "What if we put in a garden?" Sarah suggested, "something the girls could help with." Emma and Sophie loved the idea. We spent weekends planning raised beds, a small greenhouse, and even a butterfly garden. For the first time in months, the backyard felt like a place of joy instead of sadness. The garden project became a family bonding experience that was different from our pool days but equally meaningful. Emma discovered she had a talent for growing tomatoes. Sophie became obsessed with sunflowers. Sarah found peace in the quiet work of tending plants. And I learned something important about fighting bullies. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living your life fully and refusing to let someone else's hatred define your happiness. Karen still lives 3 houses down, but she might as well be invisible. The no-contact order remains in effect, and she has learned to avoid our side of the street entirely. I occasionally see her walking her dog in the opposite direction when she spots me in the yard. The other neighbors have been incredibly supportive. Tom Johnson told me he had always suspected Karen was the source of many neighborhood problems. Linda brought over a casserole when she heard about our legal troubles. Even the Millers, who rarely spoke to anyone, stopped by to say they were glad we had stood up to Karen. 6 months after the pool removal, I was working in our garden when Emma asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Daddy, are you glad Karen made us take down the pool?" I looked at her, covered in dirt and beaming with pride over the cucumber she had just picked. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because now we have this," she said, gesturing to the garden. "And gardens last longer than pools." I realized she was right. Karen had tried to destroy our happiness, but instead she had forced us to discover new sources of joy. The pool had been wonderful, but the garden was something we had built together, something that grew stronger with time and care. That night, I stood in our backyard looking at the raised beds and trellises we had constructed. Fireflies danced between the tomato plants, and the scent of herbs filled the evening air. It was different from the pool days, but it was equally beautiful. Karen had taught me that bullies rely on fear and intimidation to get their way. But she had also taught me that standing up to them, even when it costs you something precious, is the only way to protect what matters most. Our family was stronger now. Our marriage had survived the stress. Our children had learned that sometimes fighting for what is right means accepting short-term losses for long-term victories. And sometimes, what looks like defeat is actually the beginning of something even better.